The Arizona Territory in 1882 was a land of contradictions. Breathtaking beauty, shadowed by constant tension between settlers and the Apache tribes, who had called this desert home for centuries. High in the Chiricahua Mountains, where ponderosa pines stretched toward an endless sky, Thomas Tom McKenna worked alone, the rhythmic sound of his axe echoing through the forest. At 35, Tom had been cutting timber for the expanding railroad towns for nearly 8 years. His weathered hands bore the calluses of honest work, and his sun-bronzed face showed the lines of a man who'd learned to find peace in solitude. A thick brown beard covered the scar on his jaw, a reminder of the Apache raid that had taken his wife and young son 5 years earlier, leaving him with nothing but grief and an axe. The morning air was crisp with the scent of pine and the promise of autumn. Tom had been working since dawn, felling trees that would become railroad ties for the Southern Pacific's expansion through Arizona. His small cabin sat in a clearing 2 miles from the nearest settlement, surrounded by the tools of his trade, saws, axes, and stacks of seasoned timber waiting for the monthly supply wagon. As he paused to wipe the sweat from his brow, an unusual sound drifted through the forest, the unmistakable sound of someone crying. Tom froze, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle that always leaned against the nearest tree. In Apache country, any unexpected sound could mean danger. The crying came again, softer now, carried on the mountain breeze. It was the sound of a child in distress, and despite his caution, Tom felt his heart respond. He'd been a father once, and some instincts never fade, even when buried under years of solitude and sorrow. Following the sound through the dense undergrowth, Tom discovered a young Apache girl, perhaps 12 years old, sitting beside a small stream. Her dark hair was braided with beads and feathers, and her traditional dress was torn and stained with blood. She clutched her left arm against her body, and tears streamed down her face as she tried to clean a deep gash with stream water. Tom stopped 30 feet away, knowing that approaching too quickly could frighten her into running. The girl looked up at him with dark eyes full of pain and fear, but she didn't flee. Instead, she spoke in broken English, her voice trembling with exhaustion. "Please, no hurt. I am lost. My people, soldiers, came. I run, but—" She gestured to her injured arm, fresh tears beginning to fall. Tom's mind raced. The Apache wars had been raging for years, with both sides committing acts of violence that left families destroyed and communities torn apart. He knew that helping an Apache child could be seen as treason by some settlers, but he also knew that he couldn't walk away from an injured child, regardless of her heritage. "I'm not going to hurt you," Tom said quietly, setting his axe aside and raising his hands to show he carried no weapons. "My name is Tom. You're hurt, and you need help." The girl studied his face, searching for signs of deception. "My name is Ayana," she whispered. "It means eternal blossom in my language. My arm, it hurts very much." Tom nodded slowly. "Ayana, I have medicine at my cabin. Food, too. Will you let me help you?" For a long moment, they stared at each other across the small clearing, 2 people from different worlds, brought together by circumstance and human need. Finally, Ayana nodded, struggling to her feet with obvious pain. The walk to Tom's cabin was slow and careful. Ayana limped badly, and Tom could see that her injuries were more extensive than just the arm wound. When they reached the small log structure, she stopped at the threshold, her eyes wide with wonder. "You live here alone?" she asked, looking at the simple but well-maintained interior. "Yes," Tom replied, gathering his medical supplies. "I lost my family some years ago. Now it's just me and the trees." As Tom cleaned and bandaged Ayana's wounds, she told him her story in halting English mixed with Apache words. Her band had been camped in a hidden canyon when cavalry soldiers had attacked at dawn. In the chaos, families had scattered in all directions. Ayana had become separated from her grandmother and had been wandering for 3 days, surviving on berries and stream water. "My grandmother, she teaches me about the mountain spirits," Ayana explained as Tom wrapped her arm. "She says the mountains protect those who respect them. Maybe the mountains led me to you." Tom paused in his work, struck by the girl's words. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She is the wisest in our band," Ayana said with pride. She knows the old stories, the healing plants, the sacred places. She taught me to paint the ceremonial feathers for our dances. The girl's voice broke slightly. I hope she is safe. As evening approached, Tom prepared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread. Ayana ate hungrily, the first real food she'd had in days. They sat in comfortable silence, the warmth of the fire casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls. Tom, Ayana said suddenly, why do you help me? My people and your people, we are enemies. Tom stared into the fire, considering her question. I don't know if we're enemies, Ayana. I think we're just people trying to survive in a hard land. My wife, she always said that kindness was the only thing that could break the cycle of hatred. Ayana nodded solemnly, understanding more than her years should have allowed. My grandmother says the same thing. She says hatred is like a poison that hurts the person who carries it most of all. The next morning brought the distant sound of horses and shouting voices. Tom peered through his cabin window to see a group of Apache warriors moving through the valley below, clearly searching for something or someone. Ayana joined him at the window, her face lighting up with recognition. It's my uncle Nailnish, she exclaimed, then caught herself, looking at Tom with uncertainty. They come for me, but they might think you took me prisoner. Tom understood the danger immediately. If the Apache warriors found Ayana in his cabin, they might assume the worst. Years of conflict had taught both sides to expect violence rather than mercy. What should we do? Tom asked, trusting the girl's knowledge of her people's ways. Ayana thought for a moment, then moved to Tom's supply cabinet. She pulled out a white cloth, an old shirt Tom had been saving for cleaning rags, and began tearing it into strips. We make a peace sign, she explained, tying the white strips to a long stick. I will go out first and call to them. You stay here until I tell them you helped me. Tom felt a surge of protectiveness. Are you sure? I don't want you to get hurt trying to protect me. Ayana smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. My uncle is a good man. When he sees I am safe and healed, he will listen to my words. Tom watched from the window as Ayana walked into the clearing, waving the makeshift peace flag. Her clear voice carried across the valley as she called out in Apache. The warriors stopped their search and turned toward the sound, their leader, a tall man with streaks of gray in his black hair, spurring his horse forward. The reunion was emotional. Nailnish leaped from his horse and embraced his niece, speaking rapidly in Apache while examining her bandaged wounds. Tom couldn't understand the words, but he could see the relief and gratitude in the man's face. After several minutes of conversation, Ayana gestured toward the cabin. Nailnish's expression grew serious as he looked at Tom through the window. The Apache leader said something to his warriors, then dismounted and walked slowly toward the cabin, his hands visible and empty of weapons. Tom stepped outside, keeping his own hands open and away from his rifle. The two men stood facing each other, representatives of two worlds that had been at war for decades. You are the one who helped my brother's daughter, Nailnish said in surprisingly good English. She tells me you gave her shelter, food, and medicine. She was hurt and alone, Tom replied simply. I couldn't leave a child to suffer. Nailnish studied Tom's face for a long moment. My people have good reason to distrust white men, but Ayana says you treated her with kindness, asked for nothing in return. She's just a child, Tom said. Politics shouldn't matter when a child needs help. The Apache leader nodded slowly. You speak wisdom. My name is Nailnish. In your language, it means he who listens. I am war chief of our band, but I am also Ayana's uncle. I owe you a debt. You owe me nothing, Tom replied. I'm just glad she's safe. Nailnish turned to his warriors and spoke in Apache. Several of them looked surprised, but none questioned their leader's judgment. He turned back to Tom. We have been searching for 3 days. Our band was attacked by cavalry soldiers from Fort Bowie. Many were killed or captured. We feared Ayana was lost forever. Tom felt the familiar weight of tragedy. I'm sorry for your losses. I know what it's like to lose family to this conflict. You have lost family too? Nailnish asked. My wife and son, 5 years ago. Apache raiders. Tom's voice was steady but tinged with old pain. The two men stood in silence, each understanding the other's grief. Finally, Nailnish spoke again. This land has seen too much blood. Apache blood, white blood, the earth drinks it all the same. Ayana appeared at Tom's side, carrying something in her hands. Uncle, I want to give something to Tom. He saved my life. She held up a beautiful feather, painted with intricate designs in red, blue, and yellow. The artwork was exquisite, depicting symbols that seemed to dance in the morning light. This is a sacred feather, Ayana explained to Tom. I painted it myself, using the old designs my grandmother taught me. It carries the blessing of the mountain spirits and the protection of our ancestors. Tom knelt to accept the gift, understanding its significance. Ayana, this is beautiful. But are you sure you want to give it to me? Very sure, she replied solemnly. It will bring you protection and peace, and it will remind you that kindness is never wasted. Nailnish watched the exchange with growing respect. My niece is wise beyond her years. She sees what others miss, that enemies can become friends when they choose to see each other as human beings. The Apache leader reached into his own pouch and pulled out a small piece of turquoise, carved with symbols. This is for you as well, Tom McKenna. It represents safe passage through Apache lands. Any of my people who see it will know you are under our protection. Tom accepted the turquoise with deep gratitude. Thank you, Nailnish. Both of you. As the Apache prepared to leave, Ayana hugged Tom goodbye. Will I see you again? She asked. I hope so, Tom replied. Take care of yourself, and listen to your grandmother's wisdom. I will, Ayana promised. And Tom, thank you for showing me that not all white men are enemies. Word of Tom's encounter with the Apache spread through the nearby settlements like wildfire, carried by the monthly supply wagon driver, who had noticed Apache horses near Tom's cabin. The reaction was swift and polarized. Some settlers praised his compassion, while others accused him of consorting with the enemy. 3 weeks after Ayana's rescue, Tom was working in his usual clearing when he heard the approach of multiple horses. This time, however, the visitors were not Apache warriors, but a group of white settlers led by Marcus Brennan, a rancher whose spread lay 20 miles to the south. Brennan was a hard man, made harder by years of frontier life and personal losses to Apache raids. His face was weathered like old leather, and his eyes held the cold calculation of someone who saw the world in terms of us and them. McKenna, Brennan called out as he dismounted, his 5 companions spreading out in a semicircle. We need to talk. Tom set down his axe, but remained within reach of his rifle. What about, Brennan? About you harboring Apache in your cabin. About you giving comfort to our enemies. Brennan's voice carried the weight of accusation and threat. I helped an injured child, Tom replied evenly. Nothing more, nothing less. That child belongs to the same people who killed my brother and his family last spring. Brennan spat. The same people who've been raiding our settlements for years. You think showing them kindness will make them leave us alone? Tom felt the familiar surge of anger, but kept his voice controlled. I think showing them that we're capable of more than just killing might be a start toward peace. Peace? Brennan laughed bitterly. There's only one kind of peace with the Apache, McKenna, and that's the peace of the grave. You're either with us or against us in this fight. The confrontation might have escalated into violence, but the sound of approaching horses interrupted them. A new group of riders appeared, but these were Apache warriors, led by Nailnish himself. The tension in the clearing became electric. Brennan and his men reached for their weapons, but Nailnish raised his hand in a gesture of peace, showing the white cloth tied to his lance. Tom McKenna, Nailnish called out, ignoring the other white men entirely. I bring news from my niece. She has found her grandmother, and both are safe. She wanted you to know. Tom felt a surge of relief. Thank you for coming to tell me, Nailnish. I've been worried about her. Brennan stared in disbelief. You know this Apache? By name. This is Nailnish, Tom replied. He's Ayana's uncle, the girl I helped. Nailnish studied the group of armed settlers, then addressed Brennan directly. You are the one they call Brennan. The one whose brother died at Canyon Creek. Brennan's hand moved to his gun. You admit it? Your people killed my family? My people. Nailnish's voice remained calm but firm. I was not at Canyon Creek, but I know who was. They were young warriors, angry and seeking revenge for their own losses. Your brother's death was part of a cycle of violence that has cost both our peoples dearly. Don't you dare lecture me about loss, Brennan snarled. You savages started this war. Did we? Nailnish asked quietly. Or did it start when your people decided our land was yours to take? When your soldiers began killing our women and children? When your government broke every treaty they signed? Tom stepped between the two men, sensing the situation spiraling toward violence. This isn't helping anyone. Both sides have lost people. Both sides have reason to be angry. But standing here, threatening each other, won't bring back the dead. You're right, Nailnish said, his eyes never leaving Brennan's face. But some things must be said. Your brother's death was wrong, Brennan. But so was the death of my cousin's daughter at Fort Grant. So was the slaughter at Camp Grant, where your soldiers killed women and children while the men were away hunting. Brennan's face flushed with anger. Those were different situations. Were they? Nailnish asked. Or do we all just tell ourselves that our violence is justified while theirs is not? The Apache leader reached into his pouch and pulled out a small object, a child's wooden doll, carved with great care. This belonged to my cousin's daughter. She was 7 years old when she died. Her name was Eatzel. She loved to make mud pies and chase butterflies. She was no threat to anyone. The clearing fell silent except for the wind in the pines. Brennan stared at the doll, his anger warring with something else, perhaps the recognition of shared humanity that comes with a father's grief. My brother's boy was 6, Brennan said quietly. He was learning to ride. He wanted to be a cowboy like his father. His voice cracked slightly. They shot him down like a dog. I am sorry for your loss, Nailnish said, and the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. The warriors who killed your family were wrong, but their wrongness does not make all Apache evil, just as the soldiers who killed Eatzel do not make all white men murderers. Tom looked around the clearing at the faces of both groups, settlers and Apache, all marked by loss, all trapped in a cycle of violence and revenge. What if we could find another way? He asked. What if we could break this cycle? Brennan laughed harshly. You're dreaming, McKenna. There's too much blood between us. Maybe, Tom replied. But maybe that's exactly why we need to try something different. Maybe the children don't have to inherit our hatred. Nailnish nodded slowly. The lumberjack speaks wisdom, but wisdom is easier to speak than to live by. As the two groups prepared to part ways, Ayanna herself appeared at the edge of the clearing, riding a small pony. Her grandmother, a woman of perhaps 70 with silver hair and deep-set eyes, rode beside her. Tom, Ayanna called out joyfully, sliding from her pony and running to embrace him. I told my grandmother about your kindness. She wanted to meet you. The elderly Apache woman approached slowly, her keen eyes taking in the scene, the armed settlers, the tension, the careful positioning of the two groups. She spoke in Apache to Nailnish, who translated. My mother says the spirits told her to come here today. She says there is something important that must happen. The grandmother walked directly to Tom, studying his face with the intensity of someone who sees beyond surface appearances. Then, surprisingly, she turned to Brennan. Speaking in halting English, she said, You are the one whose brother died at Canyon Creek. I am sorry for your loss. Loss of family. It is the same pain for all mothers, all fathers. Brennan stared at her, clearly unprepared for this direct acknowledgement of his grief from an Apache elder. The grandmother continued, My grandson died at Canyon Creek too. He was one of the young warriors who attacked your brother's ranch. The soldiers killed him 2 days later. The silence that followed was profound. Brennan's face went through a series of emotions, surprise, confusion, anger, and finally, something that might have been understanding. Your grandson? Brennan asked. Yes. He was 17. Angry, proud, foolish. He thought killing white men would make him a hero. Instead, He made himself and his people targets for revenge. The violence, it takes everyone's children. The confrontation in the clearing marked the beginning of something unprecedented in the Arizona territory. A tentative, fragile dialogue between two communities that had known only warfare. Over the following months, Tom's cabin became an unlikely meeting place where Apache and settlers could encounter each other as individuals rather than enemies. It started small. Nailnish would occasionally stop by to share news of Ayana's progress or to discuss the movement of cavalry patrols. Brennan, surprisingly, began visiting as well, drawn by a grudging respect for Tom's courage and perhaps by his own need to understand the loss that had shaped his life. The painted feather that Ayana had given Tom became a symbol of possibility. He hung it prominently in his cabin, where both Apache and white visitors could see it. Some understood its significance immediately. Others needed time to grasp what it represented. Winter brought unexpected challenges. A harsh storm left several Apache families stranded without adequate shelter, while a group of settlers found themselves cut off from supplies. Tom found himself serving as an informal mediator, helping coordinate assistance that crossed tribal lines. "You know this can't last," Brennan told him one evening as they sat by the fire. "Washington's sending more troops. The Apache are being pushed onto reservations. Whatever this is we're doing here, it's not going to change the bigger picture." Tom poked at the fire with a stick, watching the sparks rise into the darkness. "Maybe not, but it's changing something. You can't tell me you haven't noticed." Brennan was quiet for a long moment. "I still wake up some nights, dreaming about finding my brother's body. The anger, it's still there." "I know," Tom replied. "I dream about my family too. But I also dream about Ayana, about the trust she showed by accepting my help. Both dreams are real. Both are part of who I am now." Spring brought news that would test their fragile peace. General Crook had launched a new campaign against the Apache, and several bands were being forced onto the San Carlos reservation. Nailnish's people were among those targeted for removal. The Apache leader came to Tom's cabin one last time, his face grave with the weight of unwelcome news. "We must leave," he said simply. "The soldiers are coming, and my people will not survive another winter like the last one. We go to the reservation, or we go to Mexico. Either way we go." Tom felt the familiar ache of loss. What about Ayana? What about her grandmother? "They come with us. But Ayana, she wanted to see you before we left. She has something to say." The young Apache girl appeared shyly from behind her uncle, now taller and more mature than when Tom had first found her by the stream. In her hands, she carried a new painted feather, even more elaborate than the first. "Tom," she said, her English much improved over the months, "I painted this for you. It tells the story of your kindness, so that future generations will know that not all white men were enemies." Tom knelt to accept the gift, moved by the care and artistry she had put into it. "Ayana, you don't need to give me anything. Just knowing you're safe is enough." "But I do need to give it to you," she insisted. "My grandmother says that kindness must be remembered and shared, or it dies with the person who showed it. This feather will carry the story forward." As the Apache prepared to leave, Brennan arrived with an unexpected announcement. "McKenna, I've been thinking about what you said, about the children not having to inherit our hatred." Tom looked at his neighbor with curiosity. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been talking to some of the other ranchers. We're going to try something different. Instead of just fighting the Apache, we're going to try to understand them, maybe even trade with them, if they're willing." Nailnish overheard the conversation and approached the two men. "You would do this, after all that has happened?" "I don't know if it'll work," Brennan admitted, "but I'm tired of burying friends. Tired of looking over my shoulder every time I ride out to check cattle. If there's a chance for something better." The Apache leader extended his hand to Brennan, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Perhaps the spirits have blessed this mountain after all. As Ayana and her people prepared to leave for the reservation, she made one final request. "Tom, will you promise me something?" "Of course. Promise me you'll tell people about what happened here, about how enemies can become friends when they choose to see each other as human beings." Tom smiled, thinking of the painted feather and the story it would tell. "I promise, Ayana. I'll tell them." Years later, Tom would indeed tell the story. He would tell it to settlers arriving from the east, to soldiers weary of fighting, to anyone who would listen. He would tell them about a crying Apache girl who taught him that kindness could cross any divide, and about a painted feather that symbolized hope in a land that had forgotten how to hope. The feather remained in his cabin until the day he died, a reminder that even in the darkest times, individuals can choose compassion over hatred, understanding over fear. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, those choices can plant seeds that grow into something beautiful and lasting. The cycle of violence that had defined the Apache Wars would continue for several more years, but in one small corner of the Arizona Territory, two communities had learned to see each other as neighbors rather than enemies. It was a small victory, perhaps, but as Ayana's grandmother might have said, even the mightiest oak grows from a single acorn. The painted feather had done its work, carrying forward the story of a lumberjack who gave shelter to a crying Apache girl, and the girl who left him with something more precious than gold, the knowledge that kindness, once shared, can echo through generations.